So I wanted to welcome you to the last session of the U of L MAPS program. This evening, we're going to be doing a little bit of an overview of what we discussed on resumes and then talk about some interviewing techniques and skills. So my name is Paula. I am the Director of Career Transition with USA Cares. I don't have a military background, so that is why I'm in this position to help civilianize any of our service members and veterans that need to civilianize their resume and be prepared for interviewing. So again, we've got some common obstacles and challenges that a lot of our service members do go through when it comes to transitioning into the civilian workforce and understanding the process and how to interview. So just a quick review. We try to understand the mindset of a hiring manager and a recruiter, which is what I've done for years. And it's very difficult for some of our service members and veterans to translate their skill sets into the civilian terminology. So what we're going to be, before transitioning, you want to look for a full-time job, and it's always easier to find a job when you have a job, because then you're not so desperate trying to take anything that comes your way, and then you're always going to keep looking for that next opportunity for you. So we try to get you to think like a hiring manager and a recruiter. So a few things are, when you are transitioning, when you are applying for a position, the initial screening typically takes an HR director about 10 to 15 seconds each time they look at a resume. So when they put a job interview or a job description out there, they have to go through, we'll look at this right here, they might get 100 different resumes that they have to go through. So they're only going to look at the resume for about 10 seconds. So you really want to get their attention within the first 10 seconds. After that initial screening of going through it with a recruiter, you're going to have a phone interview or possibly the face-to-face interview, which is what we like. But now with COVID, a lot of our interviews are phone interviews or virtual interviews, such as what we're doing right now. You're also going to have second and third interviews. So a lot of times you're going to be meeting with the team members and not just the decision makers of the hiring managers. So they'll need to narrow down that 100 resumes that they get. They'll narrow it down to 10, and then they'll narrow it down to 5 people. Once they've narrowed it down to 5 people, then they're going to start doing some behavioral assessments on those 5 people to even narrow it down more. And they'll probably bring it down to like 3 people. And then at that point, it'll be then it goes down to 1 to 2 people. So, and then that's where the offer gets, extended. So let's just say for a corporate recruiter and a hiring manager workload, each recruiter is working on an average of about 30 positions. So if you can imagine that they're getting about 100 resumes per position, that's 300 resumes that they're looking at. That's why they only spend about 10 seconds. So it's really important that your resume captures their attention within the first, I would say, 10 seconds. And I know we reviewed that a little earlier, but once they narrow it down and that, let's just say they have picked you for a phone screen, you really want to try to understand the organization, understand the position, and really understand how your skill set can translate into the position that they're looking for. So when you are going through this process, it is really important that follow-up emails, they're very, very important. They're going to be calling you a lot. So you want to make sure your voicemails are professional. You want to make sure that you even have voicemail set up. It's really important. I know a lot of the service members that I work with, they don't understand the importance of having a professional voicemail. So when the recruiter does call you and leave a message, you want to make sure that that first impression, because that might be the first impression that they have, is very professional. So creating your resume, I know we went over this a little earlier, but we're going to go over it really quick to kind of 101 resume writing. The resume is really going to be the dangling carrot that's going to get you in for the interview. So you want to make sure that your resume is 1 to 2 pages, no more than 1 to 2 pages. The beginning of your resume is going to be a summary of your professional experience, and that's going to be in the top part, and that's going to be just a really short paragraph of who you are, what you can do, and a lot of these resumes are going to be custom to the job description of the position that you are applying to. So you're going to have a core resume, and from that resume, you might have 4 or 5 different other resumes, depending on the job descriptions of what you are trying to apply to. You want to make sure right in this area, right under your professional experience, that you're going to have key skills. They're usually 1 to 2 words like, logistics or budgeting, depending on the position that you're going for. You want to make sure you pull out some of those key words that are in the job description, because they're going to scan, your resume will get scanned into a system, and those words are going to get pulled out of your resume, and that will really help determine whether or not you're going to be qualified for the position. So you probably have maybe 6 to 10 key skills in this area right here, and make sure it's it's just bulletproof, quick and easy read. I know when I was looking at resumes as a recruiter, I didn't have time to read everything, so I wanted to be as quick as possible. So your key skills should be just very 2-word phrases, 3-word phrases, no more than that. Your work experience, again, it's all bullet points, very easy read, does not need to be in paragraph form. It's really, again, it's a dangling carrot to get you in for an interview. It needs to be clean and consistent. It needs to be very organized and with professional email address up here. Make sure there's a professional email address with your phone number. You don't need to have an address on there, because if, let's just say you live in Radcliffe and you're applying for a position in Louisville, you certainly don't want the organization to think that you're not going to want to drive that far. Some of the do's and don'ts for the resume: make sure you design your own resume. We have a template that we use that I can share with all of you. I can get it to you. It's a resume that we use for our senior leaders, and again, it's very similar to the format here that I'm showing you. It's very clear and concise, very easy to read. Make sure you use the same font throughout your resume. Don't try to be creative and don't add color. Just use black text, use action verbs, use your keywords. And then when you do send your resume, make sure you send it in a PDF format. You never want anybody to be able to change your resume. So you should have a Word document and a PDF. The PDF is what you send. The Word document is what you're going to change if you are applying for different positions and you need to change your resume. Include a header and a footer when it's more than 1 page, and the footer should be your name with your phone number. You don't need a lot of information on the footer. When you're writing a resume, make sure you do not use a template. Don't use acronyms. Do not be creative with your font. You want to be very consistent throughout your resume. Don't use colorful text, and definitely never use a photo. Don't write it in first person, and or speak in third person. And then make sure that your don't send files with your documents either. So the terminology in the civilian sector is very difficult. I know with our senior leaders, the acronyms are really different, and it's something that is going to take time for you to understand if you're not familiar with them already. But it will come to you, and just ask a lot of questions. It's just make sure that you're understanding the terminology so that when you are in an interview, you are able to articulate, and so that the person that's interviewing you, who chances are will not be a military veteran, will understand what you're saying. So when you're looking for a position, here are a few things you need to ask yourself. You need to ask yourself the location. Where do you want to live? Are you going to stay in Louisville? Are you going to move to North Carolina? You have to ask yourself and be real. Where am I going to live? Where do I want to end up? What industry do I want to focus on? Do I want to focus on manufacturing? Do I want to be a data analyst? Do I want to be in finance? It's really important to narrow in and zero in on your industry. Titles are important too. So when you're looking for a position, and let's just say you are a process improvement, you want to make sure when you're searching for a position, you want to use the right titles that are going to match your skill sets. Skill set and experience. You certainly want to make sure that you focus in where your experience is. You don't want to stretch it, and the last thing you want to do is when you're on an interview, and let's just say you are, you're a logistics and you apply for a financial position, you don't have any financial background or experience. They're going to figure that out pretty quick. So you want to make sure that your skill set and experience matches your job search. It's very, very important. So there's some platforms to go on with your job search. One of the job search platforms is Indeed. Indeed posts positions throughout with all industries. A lot of organizations use Indeed to post their positions. It's a great platform. You will find a lot of useful information on Indeed. You can download your resume on Indeed. One thing to be careful of when you do use some of these platforms, when you download your resume, sometimes your resume blindly gets sent out and you have no idea where your resume is getting sent. So that's the only thing I really want to caution is when you do use some of these platforms, just be really careful when you are uploading your resume on some of them, because they will get blindly sent out. Another platform is ZipRecruiter. A lot of organizations do post their jobs on ZipRecruiter. Great platform. You can find all types of different opportunities, Indeed and ZipRecruiter, Monster, and LinkedIn. You really just, you go in and you sign up for an account. It's free. You type in your job title. So you might just put, logistics, Louisville, Kentucky, and then you search for a job, and then you'll have a whole list of jobs that will come up with those job titles. And you just, you look at it and you read it, and you look at the skill sets, and you think, even if it's not on your resume, you can always add it to your resume, providing you do have that skill set. You never want to mislead anybody and let them think you are somebody that you are not. And then Monster is another one. It's a little older, but it's still a great platform. One that's, I don't think on here that I use very often is Indeed. I'm sorry, is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the professional Facebook, if you will. And if you are a veteran, there is a link that you can go to that will allow you to do a premium LinkedIn for free for 1 year. If you need that information, I can certainly get that over to you, but I don't recommend doing that until your resume matches, or your profile matches your resume, because you don't want to waste the year and not have your profile matching your resume. But all of these, Indeed, Zip, Monster, LinkedIn, they're all great platforms for job search. And it's not just in one location, but it's in any location all over the world. So a lot of the organizations pay a lot of money to post positions on these platforms, and I certainly would take advantage of those. So here's some tips for a successful interview. So gentleman on my team, Greg, kind of did a little funny here. The interviewer, how do you explain a 4-year gap in your resume? Because as a recruiter, if you were not military, I would look at a resume and I would make sure that your dates all line up. And if there's a gap, I'm going to certainly ask you why there's a gap. And then I would say I went to Yale, and the interviewer would say, that's impressive, you're hired. The impression you make on the interviewer really sometimes outweighs the actual credentials. Your poise and your attitude and your social skills, your ability to communicate, along with your experience in education, I call it the likability factor. If they like you and they think that you're going to fit in with their team, then they'll be able to teach you what needs to be taught. But it really goes back to that likability factor. And you have one time to make a first impression. Yes, the resume is an impression, but as far as getting to know you and who you are, you have you've got one chance to make a first impression. I always tell my kids that. So you and the interviewer, you engage in conversation, you've got mutual exchange of information and ideas, and only through some dialogue you can both determine whether or not you're going to be good for the organization. But, it has to go both ways. You have to be comfortable with that organization. So when you're on an interview, you're interviewing the organization as well for you. It can't just be good for the organization. So it has to be good for you. So a few things for you to remember on an interview. The big thing is to be on time, 10 to 15 minutes early. A lot of times, well, I shouldn't say a lot of times, often interviewers are ready before the appointment. But you will find out, sometimes on some of these virtual interviews, sometimes the interviewer is running late, and you just need to hang tight and wait for them. If it's 15 minutes late at that point, then you might want to try to reach out to the organization and let them know you're waiting. But often they are ready for you a little bit early. Know who you're interviewing with. It's very important that whether it's virtual or you go in person, which I think a lot more we're trying to get more in person these days with COVID, but it's very important to understand and know who's interviewing you. I always suggest that you connect with the person who's interviewing you. Connect with them on LinkedIn. Get to know who they are. Give them the opportunity to know who you are via LinkedIn. If you don't know the name for some reason, I would call beforehand and ask the customer service rep or whoever answers the phone, ask who might be in charge of hiring for that position and let them know that you have an interview, but you're not quite sure who the person is that you're interviewing. And that first impression goes a long way with those individuals that answer the phone. If you're polite and they like you, a lot of times they are the gatekeeper to making decisions in the organizations. So just, try to remember that as well. Be as polite as possible, no matter what. So when you go to your interview, I think it's important to always be prepared to ask some questions on your own. This slide should have been at the end, but I'm going to go over it anyway since we're here. Once you are in an interview, I always encourage anybody who's interviewing to ask questions. Again, you're interviewing the organization just as they are interviewing you. Big questions could be, what are some of the challenges of the job that I'm going to be faced with? Is this a new role, or am I a replacement? If it's a replacement, what happened to the individual that had the position before me? Hopefully they'll say they were promoted within the organization and this is a backfill. What is the most important and pressing problems for this role, for this person to take? Discuss the culture of the company. Tell me what my team is made up of. Describe a typical day. How long have you been with the company? These are just some of the questions that I would ask. I don't recommend asking all of these questions because it might get to be a little bit too lengthy. But I think some of these questions will be answered during your interview by the person who's interviewing you. I think they will tell you, they'll share a lot more information with you than they realize. And so some of these questions will already be answered. But I think a lot of them are pretty important. You're going to want to know what what are the hours of the position? Is it first, second, third shift? That's important because that might not work with your work-life balance. So some of these questions are really, really important to ask. And people that are interviewing you expect you to ask questions. And if you don't ask questions, I think it's a red flag. Just my opinion. I think it's a red flag if you don't ask any questions whatsoever. So a few other things. When you do go on an interview, make sure you bring several copies of the resume. But the resume that you need to take is the resume that you sent in when you applied for the position. Don't take a different resume because the resume that they have in their hand is the resume that you applied to. And if you take a different copy of the resume, it's just going to confuse everybody. So make sure you bring several copies of your resume because it's not unusual for you to interview with more than 2 or 3 or 4 people in one given day. Bring copies of your transcripts. Some organizations will ask for that. It's not as common, but there are organizations that will ask for a transcript. A lot of times, though, that will be asked after your interview, and they might email you and ask you for your transcripts. Make sure you have pen and paper with you. You want to make sure you take notes. It says don't take notes during the interview, but I recommend that you do take a few notes during the interview, just so that you can remember, especially the name of the person who's interviewing you. It's really important that you do remember that. But write down as much as you can remember, and write down how you think you did. Write down where you think you can improve. Greet the interviewer with a handshake and a smile. Make sure your handshake is a firm handshake. I always know when I was interviewing people, I guess how confident they were in their handshake. The stronger the handshake, in my opinion, the more confident that person was in interviewing. And then don't jump right into business. Sometimes, it might be good to go in there and ask how their day's going. If it was a Monday, I hope you had a great weekend. One thing I do recommend, if you have not interviewed in years, I tell this to all my senior leaders that I work with, if you have not interviewed in years, I would suggest that you break the ice and go in because you're going to be nervous. There's no doubt about it. And that's okay. You're human, you're normal. Go in there and say, you know, Sam, I love meeting you. I'm excited to be interviewing with you. This is my first interview in 15 years, and I'm really nervous. That will break the ice more than you will realize. That will just kind of take some pressure off of everybody. But I highly recommend you doing that if you're nervous. It has worked more times than not. And again, you know, don't be embarrassed if you're nervous. Let them know I have an interview and I'm really nervous. That'll go a long way. Focus on your transferable skills. Focus on what you're learning, what you want to learn. Don't ever be negative. Don't ever say, you know, gosh, I'm really sorry, I don't know that. Instead, I would say, you know, I'm really excited about this position. I'm excited to learn how my skills can bring value to your organization. And then describe some of your strengths of what, you know, the value that you can bring to the organization. Never reflect on the negative. Always look forward in the positive. Tell the truth. Don't exaggerate because it will haunt you. You know, a lot of times people stretch the truth when asked, tell me what your current salary is. Organizations have the right to ask you for your tax information from the previous year. So make sure you're perfectly honest with them. Make sure you're honest with them on your transcripts. Just be honest. Honesty is the best policy. Make sure before you answer any question that you understand the question that's being asked. If you're not sure what the question is and you try to answer it, you're going to talk in circles. And the interviewer is going to realize that you have no clue what you're talking about. And it could really hurt you in the long run. So I think, in my opinion, the interviewer would prefer you to say, I'm not sure I quite understand that question. Can you rephrase that for me so that I can answer it clearly? It's really important that you try to do that. And it also engages you with the interviewer a little bit more. Watch your grammar. Employers are interested in people that can express themselves properly. Even if you have to talk slow, even if you have to correct yourself, just make sure that your grammar is proper. You know, talk slow. You might want to think before you speak. Sometimes people just start talking, and again, they talk in circles, and then they forget where they were, and they get sidetracked. And it just shows that you really aren't sure what you're talking about, and that you're not confident. The big thing is we want you to be as confident as possible when you go into an interview. That's why with your resume, going back to your resume, sorry, it's very important that you understand your resume. It's very important that you are able to articulate everything that is on your resume. And if you can't, then it needs to come off your resume. So when you're talking slow and your grammar, it goes back to the resume that you understand everything that you're saying. Some of the questions could be personal. Anticipate how you would answer some of these questions, maybe without losing your composure. One question that I love to ask everybody is, tell me something about yourself that's not on your resume. And that's a perfect opportunity for you to maybe say something personal. Like I had a gentleman tell me, excuse me, I had somebody tell me that he collects stamps from all over the world. And his stamp collection is 30 years old. Every country he went to, he collected stamps. And he shares that with his grandkids. You know, I had another one that says, I teach Little League baseball. Just let them know that you're a little bit more than just work, that you do have a work-life balance. But that's a good break the ice, kind of get to know a person a little bit better. But if you can't ask a question, just try to, again, go slow, think of your answer, and you keep your composure and answer it the best way you can. Don't expect a job offer on the first interview. It might take 5 interviews before you get a job offer. I had an individual who called me up and he said, "Oh my gosh, this is my 6th interview for this position. And now they want me to meet the team. Why do I have to meet the team? They're not the decision makers." But in reality, they are the decision makers. So you're going to go through the recruiter, then you might go through HR, then you might go through a couple hiring managers or a couple managers that are within that department. And sometimes your very last interview is going to be with your the people you're going to be working with, your coworkers. And if your coworkers don't feel that you're going to mix within their group and their team, then they'll report that back and you won't get the position. You might be the most qualified on paper for that position, but if your coworkers and the team doesn't feel that you're going to fit in with them, then you won't get an offer. So don't be surprised if it takes a couple weeks, maybe a month before you get a job offer. Don't think that you haven't succeeded in an interview. It's just they're taking their time, and that's perfectly normal, especially for some of these higher end positions. When you end an interview, you always want to be positive. Before, during, and after, you want to be positive. Doesn't matter what. But when you end, always ask what the next step is. I would ask the interviewer, how soon do you want to make a decision in hiring for this position? When do you think I'll receive some feedback? It shows that you are interested in the position. Ask what the next step is. But I think I would always ask, when do you think I can expect to hear back for a follow-up interview? Or, how soon do you want to make a decision on filling the position? When you leave, again, leave with a handshake, very firm handshake, and a smile. Your salary and benefits. There may be times that you will be asked, what are your salary expectations? One of the ways we do answer that with, especially some of my service members that we work with that are transitioning out of the military, depending on your position and what you are, we always try to recommend saying, when I was in the military, leaving the military, I was making X amount. I do understand that I am starting over, but I do bring a lot of skill set and leadership to the position and your organization. I know I won't be able to start off at the top level, but I certainly would want to work my way up to those those top levels. Don't expect to be making the most you can in these positions. You've got to grow into the positions, and you got to grow into the salaries and the benefits. Research some of the pay scales, but I give caution on that. Every organization is different when it comes to pay scale and benefits. Larger organizations can afford a higher salary and better benefits. Maybe a smaller mom and pop type organization might not be able to give you the salary that you're looking for, but they might be able to give you a work-life balance, might be able to give you better benefits. So before you take any type of an offer, before you make any type of a decision, you need to look at the whole picture and the whole package of the salary. But some of those career services on the websites, you could look at some just to get a range as to what those salaries are. Again, I wouldn't take too much of them to heart. It just depends on the organization. Most important thing, I know my kids laughed at me when I told them this, write a thank you note. Just quick email. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate learning more about your organization and learning about the position. If you feel it's something you want to move forward with, you can say, I feel my skill set and experience could benefit your organization and bring value to your team. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any further questions. I do look forward to hearing from you soon. That's key. That needs to be done within, I would say, an hour within your interview. Make sure you write a follow-up thank you. And that goes back to making sure that you have the person's contact information that interviewed you. Sometimes you will get a calendar invite from, an executive assistant, and they want you to meet with the CEO of the company. Make sure you get that CEO of the company. Make sure you get that contact information so that you can do a follow-up email with that person. So there's different types of interview questions that you will be faced with on an interview. There are behavioral style questions, communication questions, opinion questions, performance-based questions, and brain teasers. The behavioral style questions are going to be the most common questions that you will be asked. And I do have in these slides, I do have all of the behavioral style questions that we use. There's like 30 of them. What I recommend, depending on how you memorize and how you can remember, go through each question. I've had a lot of people even just write down their answers because they remember how to answer them a little bit better. I don't want you reading them on an interview, but at least if you write them out, write your answer out of how you might want to answer that question, it'll prepare you a little bit more so that when you are asked that question, you'll be able to answer that with confidence. So behavioral style questions, they overlap all different types of other types of questions. And you can be asked almost anything about your behavior in past workplaces and school settings. Some of these examples include inquiries of like tensions, like how did you handle a coworker that was disgruntled? How did you resolve any type of disgruntled employee, or if you didn't have if you did not decide that your efforts were the same or your outcomes were the same, how did you overcome those challenges with coworkers? Those are very important because teams are made up with so many different personalities and so many different people, that you have to be able to overcome some of those obstacles when you're working with them. And questions will be asked of how do you overcome some of those obstacles when you don't see eye to eye with a coworker when you're making a major decision. So you have to really ask yourself, how would I do that? It can also give insight to whether or not the candidate has a history of being like problematic and behavioral, having behavioral issues, bringing drama to the team. Depending on how you answer some of those questions, that's going to tell the interviewer what type of person you are. So communication questions are going to be questions are like, communication is so virtual to the workplace that others communicate questions in their own category. So it might be asking you how you would break bad news to a client or a coworker, inquiring how you would resolve, interpersonal conflicts. You have to be very careful with this because a lot of times people will interpret it, your answers differently, and protocols and interacting with different people. You really want to be clear and concise across the board. I think this is going to be something you want to have, like, just be very general on, not be too specific when you're answering some of these questions. you know, they're going to ask you for communication of how would you communicate with somebody if there is going to be conflict. Tell me, you know, what is your first step, first to last step in resolving that? That will tell the interviewer exactly, not exactly, but it'll tell them a lot of how you communicate with other people, which in teams and you know, different personalities, it's extremely important that you're going to be able to communicate with all different types of personalities. Opinion questions are going to be like, what would you do in X situation? They're going to look at how you analyze a situation. I think the interviewer is going to be trying to like pick the right answer. But, you know, the truth is there in every answer. I think I would, you know, try to, you know, when you're giving an opinion answer, always try to come out with the best outcome. Always try to come out with a positive outcome. Try to come up with a solution that is going to better your team, that's going to better the organization. But I think an opinion question should always be an outcome of something positive. Negative usually doesn't get you very far. Performance-based questions are based on your experience. So again, if it's on your resume, make sure you've actually, you can talk it. Make sure you've got a lot of confidence in what you're saying. They're going to want to know what your achievements are. They're going to ask you, you know, based on your experience, you know, I see you did XYZ. Tell me a little bit more in detail on how you did that, and tell me about, you know, some of the outcomes of your performance in this type of role. They're going to want to know, you know, logistics, let's just say. Tell me a little bit how you overcame some of the logistical issues with trying to, you know, get product from point A to point B when there's a supply chain issue, or, you know, again, it's based on your performance. It's based on your experience. So make sure that your experience on your resume is really your experience, so that you can elaborate and show them how you can bring value to the organization. So brain teasers really don't seek a right answer. You're really being evaluated on your ability to like analyze some information. And again, these are more opinion. You know, why is a tennis ball fuzzy? What's the angle of the hands of the clock of, you know, 8:13? How do you describe a sandwich to someone who's never seen one? They want to see your creative side. They want to see how you can answer some of the, I guess, questions that have nothing to do with the position, but just kind of catch you off guard. And they want to see how quick you are on your feet as far as analyzing some of these answers. So again, some of the behavioral study questions that we did go over, I've got them here in the slides. I'm not going to go over every single one of them, but again, I would make sure that you go over them. They are categorized. So teamwork is part of the behavioral style questions. You know, they're going to want to know conflict resolution, how you work with the team. It's, you know, that's very important to any organization is teamwork. So I would make sure that you study some of these questions. You know, give me an example of how you were faced with conflict. You know, we all make mistakes and wish we could take back. What did you learn from them? You know, those types of questions. Client-facing questions. Describe a time when it was especially important to make a good impression on the client. What did you do to make that first impression or that good impression? Tell me a time that you please the customer with your service. You know, those are some of the customer service type questions. And then, you know, ability to adapt. All of us are under pressure at some time. Tell me, what did you do to overcome some of the pressure? What did you do? How did you work your way through it? The first job you ever had, how did you learn the ropes? You're getting a new position. They're going to ask you, how do you foresee yourself with overcoming different personalities and the pressure of the position that you're going to be faced with? Understand these questions, because these are very common questions. And I know this is being recorded, so you'll be able to pull these questions off the PowerPoint. Time management skills is very important. If you've got multi-projects going on, how do you prioritize your time management? How do you know which project to finish first? How do you handle stress? How do you handle moving along in a timely manner and getting everything done on time? And your communication skills. When were you able to persuade someone into seeing things your way? You've got a manager who has, a way of doing things, but you have a better way of doing it, or you think you do. How were you able to persuade that person to think the way you think, maybe outside the box? So these are really informational questions that you need to learn and know, and you need to be able to answer them with confidence. We've got motivation and values. What's your biggest accomplishment? How did you achieve that accomplishment? How do others see you? With your integrity. Tell me about your integrity. How are you creative at work? What about a time that you were dissatisfied? What did you do to make it better? These are all questions that are asked in an interview, whether it's the first interview or it could be the last interview. But it's very important that you do understand how to answer these questions, because a lot of times, again, they are asked in a lot of the interviewing situations. So in summary, tips for a successful interview. I've given you the tips on that. Interview questions, and then for you to ask, because again, you're interviewing the organization, they're interviewing you. It's got to be a good fit all the way around, not just for the organization. And then again, the behavioral style summary questions are very crucial in knowing how to understand those. So good interview, be on time, bring a pen and paper, know who you're interviewing with, get the contact information, ask good questions, make sure you follow up with an email, a thank you email, ask them the next steps, ask them, how far along they are in the interviewing process, when do they want to make a decision. And if for some reason, let's just say you don't get the position, I would ask for feedback, because you're going to want to know that for the next interview. I've had individuals, I've had hiring managers come back to me and say, boy, he was really qualified for the position, but he talked so negatively about his last position. He was just too negative. I don't think he's in it for this position. I think he's in it just because he wants to get out of where he's at. I think it's important that you do get feedback, and a good manager and a good interviewer will give you good feedback. And then you need to learn from those mistakes. If you didn't get the position, you need to learn from that. And you need to take it to the next interview so that you don't do it again. And if you do it again, it's okay. Ask again. Why didn't I get this position? Can you help me for the next interview? And let me tell you, they're going to help you. Everybody wants you to succeed. Everybody does. So behavioral style questions, you ask the questions. And I think with all of this being said, I am available if you ever need any mock interviewing. My contact information is out there. It's paula@usacares.org. I am happy to help you if you want to do any type of mock interviewing. My team and I are here to help you. Whatever you need help with, bottom line is we want you to succeed and we want you to get your dream job. So again, USA Cares, we are impacting lives. We do help post 9/11 veterans. We do help with career transition. Our goal is to keep everybody employed so they can keep their lights on and their roofs over their head. We are a post 9/11 military veteran service for family, for emergency financial services. And we do help with the career transition, which is my department. So I am here to help anytime that you need help. Are there any questions at all that I can answer before we end?
Hey, I have a couple questions.
Yes.
Real quick. So my name is Michael.
Hi, Michael.
I'm a veteran. I spent 20
Thank
years
you.
in. So I had a couple questions. So under achievements, should we list the awards and medals that we received? Where should we put that on our resume? Because I noticed when I was job searching, there one interviewer actually asked what awards I had gotten. Although a lot of veterans are actually really humble about some of the stuff they've earned.
Yeah.
So should that be something that we should put on our resume?
Yeah, I always recommend that you do put the awards on there, Michael. That's a great question. What we do is, so we do the professional summary, the key skills, then we get into the education, professional experience, and at the end, you can put training, certification, and then awards. I do think it's important that you add the awards. We put them towards the end of the resume. But yeah, I think it's important that you do put your awards on there. You've accomplished them, and it's very much worth noting.
Awesome. All right. The next one is during interviewing. So for a lot of us, combat experience does come up, or it's listed somewhere on the resume because our duty positions are tied directly to it. How should we go about referencing that without it turning into a war story?
Well, the first thing we want to do is make sure it's not on your resume like that. Okay. So what I do, because I'm not military at all, I work with service members, and I'm happy to work with you as well, in civilianizing the resume to where we turn that into, like, inventory control, or we civilianize it so that it really doesn't come up in question. We always try to keep the word combat out of resumes, conflict resolution, anything like that. We do keep that out of the resume so that it doesn't come up. Now, if you're interviewing with somebody who has a military background, then it's okay, you get it, you can talk about it. But for somebody like me who doesn't have a military background, if it's not on your resume to where it's really pointed out on your resume, then it should not come up in conversation. So I'm more than happy to work with you, Michael, if you need help. I'll work with you and send you a sample resume. And, we spend a couple hours with each service member on their resume to try to civilianize it. So I'm certainly more than happy to do that with you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And I have two more questions.
Yeah, sure.
Professional credentials like PMP or SHRM SCP.
Yep.
Should that go before my traditional civilian education, or should that kind of go after it, or or should it be based kind of on the job that I'm applying for?
Well, we always put like the certifications towards the end. So we would put, like if it's a SHRM or a PMP. Now you could put that in your key skills. So you could put, like, if you're PMP certified, you could put in your key skills, because those are just bullet points just below your professional summary. You can put PMP certified or SHRM certified, and that way it's right there, and there's no mistake, and that anybody's going to not see that.
Oh, that's great, putting it in key skills. And then the last question I had was for mil spouses who did not work, they were stay-at-home parents.
Yes.
For the duration, or or short-term, long-term during the service member's service. how do they cover that gap on the resume or during an interview? Because you were talking about covering gaps in time.
Yeah.
Some gaps in times are 15, 20 years, and domestic engineer is almost relatively insulting. There's so much more to being the stay-at-home parent, especially while the spouse is deployed.
Sure. It depends on the position that they're going for, I guess. I mean, if they had some experience prior to that, you put that on there, but I would absolutely say, military spouse, and lay it out there. I would not hide that at all. And then you put your years of experience. And we do work with military spouses as well. I've got a lot of organizations that want to hire military spouses. I've got one in particular that's remote. So, if your spouse is looking for an opportunity, please reach out to me. I've got some really good military spouse. There's also a liaison at Fort Knox who works with military spouses. Her name is Summer. I can't remember her last name. I can get you that information. Maybe if somebody could reach out to me via email, just to remind me. What I'll do is I'll do an email introduction with with Summer. I think it's Summer Carney, I think is her last name, but she does work with the military spouses on Fort Knox. But I also do have a couple of organizations that I work directly with that is looking to hire military spouses. And one position is a remote position for spouses.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here this evening.
Yeah, I'll be in contact.
Please do. Please. Any other questions that I can answer? I hope tonight was helpful for all of you. And again, I am always available if you need any help with anything. If you have any questions, if you want to do a mock interview, whatever you need, it's Paula, Paula, at usacares.org. Please reach out to me, and we want to help as much as we can.